Hi, I'm Ninka and today I'm going to show you how to do mosaic crochet. There are several different mosaic crochet techniques. In my designs I've used the inset technique where you work both forward and back in rows, so you have fewer yarn changes and can simply carry the yarn up the side when you move on to the next row. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today. You use several different stitches for mosaic crochet, but they're all actually really basic ones. For inset mosaic, they are single crochets, double crochets, and chain stitches, and that's it really. I'm now going to take you through how to read an inset mosaic chart. You read the chart from right to left, and by each cream coloured block on this chart, you will work a cream coloured single crochet. And in row 1, you only have cream blocks, so once you reach the end of the row, you chain 1 to turn and then single crochet back across to the beginning. When you reach the last stitch, you change colour to chestnut, leaving the cream colour attached, and then you're ready for row 2. For row 2, you first work a single crochet for the edge stitch, and then you'll see that the next block is a cream one. So you'll chain 2 stitches with the chestnut and skip 1 stitch. These 2 chain stitches will eventually lie behind your work. So you skip 1 stitch for the cream block, and then you come to block number 3, which is a chestnut coloured one. Count up the chestnut blocks, that's 10 blocks, so you crochet 10 single crochets in chestnut. After these 10 chestnut single crochets, we have another cream block, so chain 2 again and skip 1 stitch. You'll later work a cream stitch into the skipped stitch. So once you've skipped the stitch, you once again work 10 chestnut single crochets for the 10 chestnut blocks. In this blanket, you'll repeat this pattern as many times as you need to, all the way to the end of the row. Then chain 1 to turn and work the same row back. So where you worked chestnut single crochets, work single crochets again, and where you chain stitches, chain 2 stitches again and skip the chain space. Single crochet across the next single crochets, chain 2, then single crochet in the edge stitch, changing colour to cream at the same time. And then you're ready to move on to row 3. So to recap, when you work the return row on the wrong side of your work, you just repeat the stitches you made in the forward row. So single crochet into your single crochets and chain above the chain stitches and then skip the stitch below. And at the end of the return row, you change colour to cream in the edge stitch by picking up the cream from row 1 and leaving the chestnut yarn hanging. And then you can continue following the chart, working your single crochets and chain stitches as well as double crochets into the skipped stitches below. Let's put the theory into practice and crochet a swatch together. I've already completed row 1. For that I started with a foundation chain of 24 stitches plus 1 extra for the turning chain. The pattern itself only has 23 stitches, but we need an extra edge stitch at the end of the row to anchor the pattern. Then working from right to left, I worked 24 single crochets, chained 1 to turn, and then single crocheted back to the beginning again. So here in my 24th single crochet, my last stitch, I'm going to change colour to chestnut in the final pull through of the stitch. So take your chestnut yarn, wrap it over your hook and pull it through the 2 loops to complete the stitch. Then tighten the cream yarn a little and then you can leave it hanging. So chain 1 to turn and we're ready for row 2. So the first stitch is our edge stitch and it's a chestnut block, so work 1 single crochet. The next block is cream, so not in the colour that we're using, so we chain 2 and then we skip 1 stitch and single crochet in the next one. And this is the first stitch of our chestnut section, that's the section over here. And we need a total of 10 chestnut single crochets. That's 10. We've now reached this cream block here, so we chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. And then we need another 10 single crochets in chestnut. At the end of our swatch, we work 1 last single crochet for the edge stitch, and that will give us an anchor on this side in this rose colour. Then chain 1 to turn, and then single crochet in each single crochet. When you reach the chain space, chain 2, and continue with single crochets in the next set of single crochets. I've now reached the next chain space, so chain 2, and then single crochet in the final edge stitch. And you'll change colour to cream in the final pull through. So simply pick it up and pull it through. But don't pull the yarn up too tightly here. Then chain 1 to turn. And now we move on to row 3. So begin as before with 1 single crochet for the edge stitch. And now our next block on the chart is a cream one, and on our swatch we have the chain stitches across this space. So that means we need to work a double crochet in front of these 2 chains in the cream coloured stitch that we skipped in row 2. That's this here. So make sure your hook stays in front of the chain stitches, pull up a loop, and then complete the double crochet as normal. As you can see, the double crochet lies in front of the chain stitches, which are now hidden at the back of our work. Our next block is a chestnut coloured block, so we chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. So check your work carefully to make sure you skip the correct stitch, and then you're going to single crochet in the next one. And we need a total of 8 cream coloured single crochets here. Then we come to another chestnut block, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. And the next block is cream, and that lies above the chain space, so we double crochet in front of the 2 chains into the skipped stitch from row 2. Now you can see that once again on the back those chain stitches are running behind the double crochet. After that we have another chestnut block, so chain 2 and skip 1 single crochet, and then work 8 cream single crochets. The next stitch, that's the last stitch on the chart itself, is a chestnut coloured one, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch, and then work 1 single crochet for the edge stitch to anchor the chain 2 of the pattern. Chain 1 to turn, and then repeat what you've just done. So working backwards, single crochet into the single crochet stitches and chain the same number of chains across the chain stitches. When you reach a double crochet, and you need to check carefully for them, as sometimes they can be hard to see behind the chain stitches, and this time you single crochet into the double crochet. Then chain 2 across the chain space, and then continue with single crochets. So yes, the main thing to watch out for are those double crochets. They can be trickier to see from the back of your work. Here I need to chain 2, and then single crochet in the double crochet, and then single crochet in the final edge stitch and change colour to chestnut in the final pull through. And then chain 1 to turn. this is what we've got so far, and you can clearly see the edge stitch and then the cream stitches across. Now for row 4, after the edge stitch, we have a cream block. So chain 2. The next one is chestnut coloured, and we have a chain space in the previous row. So here we double crochet in the chestnut coloured stitch below the chain space and work in front of the chain stitches. Those chain stitches at the back will create a striped pattern running across the back of your work. We have another cream block, so chain 2 and skip the next stitch. And then work 6 single crochets in chestnut. That's 6, and we need 2 chain stitches for the next cream block. Then our next chestnut block is above a chain space, so double crochet here in front of the chain stitches in the chestnut stitch below. The next block is cream, so chain 2. Skip the stitch above the cream double crochet and double crochet in the next stitch below the chain space. Now checking the pattern, we have a chestnut double crochet, a space for the cream, another chestnut double crochet. So here we need to chain 2 again for the next cream block. And skip the stitch below it, and then work 6 chestnut single crochets. So chain 2 for the next cream block. We're over here, skip 1 stitch, and the next chestnut block is above a chain space, so double crochet in front of the chains in the skipped stitch below. And then finish with the edge stitch. Chain 1 to turn, and now we work back. So work single crochets into all the single crochet and double crochet stitches and chain across the chain spaces. Make sure you check the front of the pattern regularly to see where the double crochets are. It would be a real shame to reach the end of the row and realize you've missed one. That's 6 single crochets done, so chain over the chain spaces, single crochet in the double crochet, chain 2 again. Be careful here as we have another double crochet, so single crochet in that. And at the end, single crochet in the edge stitch and change color to cream. That's one thing that's great about Inset Mosaic. There's lots of color changes, but no extra ends to weave in. We now move on to row 5, a cream row as the first block of the chart indicates. And we're going to single crochet for the edge stitch. And the next block is also cream. We have a chain space here, so we're going to have to double crochet in this skipped stitch below the chains. Remembering to keep your hook in front of the chain stitches as you work the double crochet. The next block is chestnut, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. The next cream block is above a chain space, so double crochet in the skipped stitch below. The next one is a chestnut block, so chain 2, skip 1 stitch, and then we have 4 single crochets in cream. Then we chain 2 for the next chestnut block and skip 1 stitch, and then double crochet in the skipped stitch below the next chain space. We're at the point for our next double crochet. Then chain 2 for the next chestnut block, skip 1 stitch, and then work 4 cream single crochets. The next block is chestnut, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. Then double crochet in the skipped stitch below the next chain space. Then chain 2 for the next chestnut block and single crochet in the edge stitch. For the return row, as before, single crochet in the single crochet and double crochet stitches, making sure you don't miss any double crochet stitches by mistake, and then chain the same number of chain stitches across all the chain spaces. And now you just continue following the chart, paying attention to what your working colour is and what colour the blocks are on the chart, and that will determine what stitch you need to crochet. And at the end of the return row, you change colour, picking up the colour from the previous row. It doesn't really matter how you do that. And there you can see how the pattern is taking shape. So simply continue following the chart, block by block, until the end. I'm now going to take you through how to crochet the mosaic section of my cushion design. I must confess that it took me quite a few attempts to nail the pattern, but perseverance really pays off. Now, the beginning is not very exciting, so I've already done that for you. It's simply a forward row of single crochets, turning chain, and a return row of single crochets. I've started with 30 single crochets. Of course, in the cushion pattern, the pattern repeats, so instead of stopping here, you continue repeating it until the end of your row. For row 2, I need to change colour to cream and work 1 turning chain, and then we can get started. So my first stitch is always an edge stitch, so I single crochet with the cream colour for the first block. The next one is also cream, so I single crochet in the next stitch. The third block is grey, but my working yarn here is cream, so that means I need to chain 2 and skip 1 stitch for the grey block. In row 3, we'll work a grey double crochet in the skipped stitch to fill in the gap. We now have 3 cream blocks, so we need 3 single crochets. Then we come to a grey block, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. And then we need 3 single crochets again in cream. This row has a repeating pattern of 3 cream blocks and 1 grey one, so continue repeating these steps following the chart. I'm now here with a grey block next, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. then 3 cream single crochets. Now here at the end of my swatch, the pattern is a little bit truncated, but I've now crocheted these 2 cream blocks and I end with an edge stitch and a turning chain. So turn your work, and now we need to work row 2 backwards. So we're still on row 2 of the chart, just working in the other direction. Look at your stitches and you need to single crochet in the single crochets of the forward row. So here there's 3 single crochets, and now we've reached a chain space, so we chain 2 stitches across the chain space, then 3 single crochets into the single crochets, and again you just continue repeating this until the end of the return row. In the last edge stitch, change colour to grey in the final pull through of the single crochet and leave your cream yarn hanging this time. Then chain 1 and turn your work. Now we're in row 3. You don't see the pattern yet, but that will all change in this row. So the first 3 stitches are grey. The first is the edge stitch. Then we have another single crochet. And the third stitch is over the chain space. So we need to double crochet in the skipped stitch with our grey. Working in front of the 2 cream chains here and into the single crochet under them. So you insert your hook in the stitch and make sure the hook stays in front of the chains above, and then complete the double crochet so that it lies in front of the chain stitches. The next block is a cream one, so we chain 2 and skip the next stitch. Then we have 3 grey blocks on the chart, so single crochet in the single crochets for the first 2 blocks. And the third one is above a chain space again, so we double crochet in the skipped stitch below the chain space. The chain stitches simply run across the back of your work, kind of like floats. Now the next block is a cream one, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. Then 1 single crochet in grey, and then another cream block, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. Then we have 3 grey blocks, and the first one is above a chain space, so we double crochet in the skipped stitch below in front of the chain stitches. My next block is a cream one, so chain 2 and skip the next stitch, and the next grey block is above a chain space, so double crochet in the skipped stitch below. Then another cream block, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch, and the next 3 are grey, so that's 2 single crochets and a double crochet in the skipped stitch below the chain space. I've now reached the end of my row, so I single crochet in the last stitch for the edge stitch, and then I chain 1 to turn. In the return row, the stitch you need to work is determined by what stitch you encounter, so work single crochets in all the single crochet stitches as well as the double crochet stitches, and you chain the same number of chain stitches across every chain space you come to. You need to watch out for the double crochets. Here it looks like I just have a single crochet and some chain stitches, but if I check the front, I see I have a double crochet as well. At the end of the row, change colour in the edge stitch and chain 1 to turn so you're ready for row 4. You can now see that the pattern is properly starting to emerge, which is really fun. You begin row 4 with 4 cream blocks, so that's the edge stitch, plus 2 single crochets. Then the 4th block is above a chain space, so double crochet in the skipped stitch below in front of the chain stitches. The next block is grey, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. Then we have 3 cream blocks, so that's 2 single crochets and a double crochet in the skipped stitch below the chain space. Our next block here is a grey one, so chain 2 and skip 1 stitch. The next cream stitch is above a chain space, so double crochet in the skipped stitch below, and then 2 single crochets. Then chain 2 for the grey block, that's over here, then a cream double crochet in the skipped stitch below the next chain space. Then chain 2 for the grey block, then another cream double crochet followed by 2 cream single crochets. That's over here. Then chain 2 for the grey block, then double crochet in the skipped stitch for the cream, followed by single crochets. Let me double check. So we need 2 single crochets here in total. Then chain 2 for the grey block, and double crochet in the skipped stitch. Now don't doubt yourself at this point, the pattern doesn't fully match the chart until you have worked the double crochets in the skipped stitches in the next forward row. In the return row, once again work single crochets into all the single crochet and double crochet stitches and work the same number of chain stitches above each of the chain spaces. Watch out for those double crochets that like to hide amongst the chain stitches. And now we're ready for row 5, and you simply continue following the chart as we've just done until you reach the end of the last return row, and then your swatch should look like this. Here you can see where I've carried my yarn up the side with the edge stitches on both sides. For the cushion, you crochet a border around it, so that will hide the edge stitches so they're no longer visible. Now remember to take your time, pay attention to the chart and your crochet fabric itself, and with a bit of practice you too can master this mosaic technique. That's it for this inset mosaic tutorial. Don't worry if your first attempt goes awry, we've all been there. If you begin with the cushion motif, it's a real challenge with all the changing rows, but just work slowly and carefully through the pattern and you'll get there in the end. And then you can use your new mosaic skills to make some amazing projects.